Hi, it's Paul Antonelli here. Welcome to another episode of the Ideal Business Podcast. I'm still trekking my way through the Great Victoria Desert, about to sort of cross over into the Gibson Desert in Western Australia. Set in my current settings in a campsite in the desert, red sand underfoot, blue skies, it's early in the morning. Just thought I'd get up and produce a bit of a podcast while I'm a bit enthused. Okay, so today's subject is, are you playing a long game or a short game in business? So one of the things that we sort of potentially do as business owners is create unnecessary stress for ourselves based on our timelines and what we want to set. And there's a really big difference between playing a long game and a short game. I think what happens is we don't intentionally necessarily go, look, I'm playing the short game. But I remember when I set up businesses before, I was, when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was really focused on growing quickly and getting there quickly, which is really quite ironic when you think that at that age you've got plenty of years ahead of you, plenty of time to get something built, but for some reason there's this urgency to scale big and get there quickly. It's really interesting reflecting back on it, but it taught me some really interesting lessons between the long and the short game, and it really fits in well into the concept of an ideal business. Because what had happened was in the manufacturing business that I had, I was in the late 20s, started this business, and it all sort of, it was a business that imploded and there was all sorts of fallout from it. And when I reflected back on that 4 to 5 years journey, I had my daughters, Tessa and Carissa, were very young. They were really young. They were sort of 2 and 4 at that time. And I'd realised that because I had this focus on getting there quickly, it was all consuming. And I'd missed out a lot on, I'd leave home at 7 in the morning, get back at 7 at night, and it was really long days, long weeks. And it was just all consuming. It was all consuming. And a lot of it, when I reflect back on, was on this, we got to get there, we got to grow it, we got to scale it. And in a way, the business sort of takes over and it takes control of you and it starts driving you. It actually starts driving you. It starts driving your life, which is pretty common. And I guess, the implosion, once the implosion followed, everything just went quiet. It was quite surreal. There's no other way of explaining it. It was quite surreal. It went from this activity, so much stuff going on, to literally within a couple of days, it just gone quiet, and everything, my sense of who I was, my sense of purpose, what I was involved in, all that stuff just sort of disappeared overnight. And you've got this, actually there was a huge relief with it because I wasn't sure where it was all going. And so then we spent a bit of time looking at it. I know I was reflecting on it and going, well, God, that sucks. That really sucks. Because I thought it was going to be, 4 or 5 years, 6 years, we'd get it up. We did get the turnover up and could never work out if we were making money. It was one of those really confusing businesses. We certainly never had any cash flow. It was always very challenging. I thought we'd just get to where we needed to go in 5 or 6 years. And so it was just worth putting the hard yards in. So you put in the hard yards in, you tolerate it, you do what you need to do, and then eventually it'll turn around. It was a very flawed logic. And you can do that, looking at can work. The problem with that strategy or that approach, which is very much a short game approach, is that if it doesn't work, if you don't quite get there in time and it doesn't work, it ends up causing you a lot of stress. And you start sort of second guessing yourself and you sort of go, I didn't get done what I needed to do. A lot of these milestones which we set ourselves. It's not like anyone else is setting them for us. And so I think when it all sort of imploded, I looked around and I changed direction and went into a whole different area. Did a permaculture certificate, started growing my own food, because we really came back to baseline. We didn't have anything. We lost everything that we had before then. So we started with nothing really. So just had to move out the house that we were buying and go on rent and all that sort of stuff. And what had happened during that time, for the next few years that unfolded, we really were, it was a period, and with one of my ex-partners from that business, we sort of worked together for a few years as we determined what we were going to do next. And we built a website and we did some consulting and we did a whole range of different things. And we're just sort of trying to find which way to go. And so then as things unfolded going forward, and we had lots of other experience since then, I guess what that left me with was you're better off living, and the approach that I have now with business is that it's a long game, so I do adopt a long game approach. And the difference between a long game and a short game approach is that I still set forecasts with the business, with the team, we still set goals that we're trying to achieve, but I'm not wrapping my life around these objectives being achieved in the time that we set, because the big trade-off, I guess, is that when you set yourself a long game, a short game approach, you've got to go all in. It's all consuming. It's got to take up all of your time. It's just something, because you're rushing, you're heading towards a goal. When you adopt a long game approach, you sort of realise that it's not for me, it wasn't really going to be worth it doing that, because I've experienced the all-in approach, not having joy coming out of it. In fact, losing everything as well. Not only did I, miss that chunk of time with family and my small kids, but also started back with zero. Actually, it consumed everything. So then I decided, well, that wasn't going to happen anymore. And so for me, business then had to be a bit more of a long game, as long as it was paying its way and we were growing it and we were enjoying it. But probably the most important thing is, as long as it was enabling us, myself and our family, to do what we wanted to do and the way we wanted to operate. We were homeschooling our kids, which we did for most of their lives. We travelled a bit. So we had things that we wanted to do, and as long as it was able to support that, then it was fine. So it was very much a change. So the difference in essence was, because it was a long game, there's a few things that come into play. Whenever you'd look at dialing something in or kicking something off, you might give yourself a couple of months to get it going, which is very short. So it was a bit of a different approach, where it was all about, well, let's set ourselves a bit of a long game approach. And when you look at building a business and saying, look, I want to build a $10 million business, something that I can sell. Now, if someone said to you, if I'd said to you, look, you want to build a $10 million business, yeah, you've got a year to do it. You've got 1 year to get out there and build this business that's worth 10 million, so you need to be producing $3 or $4 million worth of profit, or you just got to get out there. You'd sort of look at that and go, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Look, I know I would, I know I did. And so it's sort of that, it's not necessarily that the goal's ridiculous or unachievable. It's more linked into the time frame. Because there's journeys, there's things that you have to go through in order, and I'm a really strong believer that if you want to be a successful or have a successful business, you need to become the person that's evolved and has acquired the knowledge and the skills and the experience to own a successful business. It's not the other way around. And so that just takes experience, and it takes journey, and it takes lots of things happening, good, bad, all those sorts of things. It's just the roadmap of running and operating and growing a business. And so what happens is, over time then, by setting these goals too short, we sort of kick ourselves, we're a bit disappointed, we didn't quite hit that goal, and there's always a question, well, what's happened? We got stuck, or this isn't going on. But when you stretch those time frames out, and you sort of adopt an approach of bit by bit by bit, you can actually look back and see the things that you've achieved. And it's rare that we actually achieve the goals we set. I know it's particularly in the early days of business, it was very rare. We'd set a forecast up, or we do this, we do that, and we were short, and we'd go, oh, what went wrong? And then you'd set up another forecast. And it was always a forecast, I guess, that was set up on the proviso that we knew what was going on and we had a level of predictability. And what I've come to realise, that takes a little bit of time in any business model to groove in. It's not something that happens in 1 or 2 years. So that might take 5 or 6 years to sort of groove in, and then you go, oh, we've done, and it's a bit like the Thomas Edison approach. You know, when they ask him how he invented the light bulb, what you hear is that it took him about 10,000 goes. Eventually he said, I just ran out of things that didn't work. I just ran out of things that didn't work, which is really interesting view. So he just kept doing things. And so in business, you know, I think there's a very skinny line to get things really grooved in and perfect in business. There's a really skinny line, you know. But there's infinite lines and infinite paths to do things incorrectly, infinite in every area. So, you know, simply by that logic, it's a lot more difficult and a lot to actually get it right, you know. And the way you get it right is by doing a lot of things that aren't right. And that's a bit of a long game approach. And so by setting yourself up, really setting yourself up for the view that you're going to build a long business, it changes a number of things. It actually enables you to have, not be too hard on yourself. And what you'll find is that it enables you to set a little bit more realistic timeframes as well around getting things done and what you want to achieve. And it reduces, I guess, potential stress and stuff. And the other thing it does is it also prevents you from putting everything in, you know, like this is it, this is going to be my focal point, this is what I'm going to do. You know, it's going to be that all-consuming sort of an approach to business. What it does is when you play the long game, you sort of go, I'm not going to absolutely, you know, do everything possible with this. I'm going to have a bit more balance. And so there's a real advantage in playing a little bit of a long game and adopting a long game approach with your business. And it's not to say that you don't set yourself goals and you don't push yourself and push your team, but it is about expectations, and it's sort of accepting the fact that this is a long game. If you want to build something of true value, at the end it's an incredibly valuable asset that can support what you do and support your life, then it just takes time. And you just have to look at any really valuable businesses. Most of these businesses have been at it for a decade or more, or 2 decades or 3 decades, or, you know, and we tend to forget that. So I'm a really big believer now in anything. When I approach business and when I look at business and when I think about business, I adopt a bit of a long game approach. And so the idea is to, you know, I've got to believe in what I'm doing, but at the same time, I'm really not prepared to sacrifice other aspects of my life because it could be for the short term, you know, but in essence, it might end up taking longer, and then you just have resentment. You don't love your business. You know, that's how you fall out of love with your business, because it's like, it's stopping me and it's doing this and it's not achieving that. So it has its own entity, its own identity, and you can become quite sort of jaded with it. So if you want to have a really healthy relationship with your business, make sure the business is an ideal business that supports your life. I'd really encourage thinking about business as a long game. And a long game could be 15 years, 20 years. It's not 3 or 4 years, that's really a short game. But, you know, over the long term, you can actually achieve a lot. We just got to take some of that pressure off ourselves and build a sustainable approach, which means that it's not something that we're just going to get in and get out of. We're building a sustainable way of running and operating a business, which is going to really support us in our personal goals and life as well. Thanks for joining me from the Great Victorian Desert for this podcast, and I'll catch up with you in another one. Ciao for now.